Friday, so I thought I'd do another one of these videos. People seem to respond to them pretty well, like the stupid stories I can tell you. If you're a real MMA fan, you'll like some of them. If not, then I can tell something decent maybe. I know the video quality really sucks, but I'm working with like 2013 technology here. So if this goes over well, maybe I'll update my camera or whatever, but I hate learning new technology, so I don't know if that's going to happen. Somebody also complained about my squeaky chair, but I have ADD pretty bad. I don't sit still very well, and lucky I can sit here and actually put one of these videos together. I mean, I'm really in a room all by myself talking to a camera, which I feel stupid enough doing as it is. Still sticking to what I was saying earlier about kind of going in chronological order with some of these stories of my career and the people I've met and all of that. I mean, going back even to the beginning, it's hard for me to accept the fact that people call me a legend, or they think I'm really tough or whatever, because my career was actually, kind of a disappointment as far as like picking up a big win against a big name guy, while he was in his prime. I beat most guys who had names either on their way up or on their way out. So, and I never won like UFC title or anything like that. I mean, I was just happy to have fought in the UFC a couple times. And even when I first started fighting, I just did it because I enjoyed the sport. I just was happy to be there. Naturally I wanted to win, but I honestly would have fought and lost and been happier than not having fought at all. That's why I've had so many fights. Because that was my mentality back when I was younger. And I was told by Monty Cox, who was the first promoter that I fought with, that a lot of the tougher guys wanted to fight me because they thought I'd be like an easy win. And I really didn't know much when I first started. My first fight, I remember I had no idea what the guard was. My second fight, I won with a guillotine choke, but I didn't know that's what I was doing. I was trying to jam my thumb in his throat. It just looked like a guillotine choke.
Don't let him control that wrist, Wesley. Control that wrist. You're okay, Wes. Control the wrist.
But then I started picking stuff up from there. It was a lot of things. The sport has evolved throughout my entire career. I've watched this, been here since the very beginning. Even when I first started fighting, it was still the old school, bare knuckle, headbutts, anything goes days. I think when I had my first fight, they might have been at like UFC 12 or 13. I mean, it was a long time ago. So, and I'm using UFC to reference the time frame because they're on UFC 2 million or something like that. I was the first ever sanctioned MMA fight in the state of Iowa, and I was also the first ever fight on the Extreme Challenge event. Extreme Challenge, the hardcore fans are going to know what it is. It was promoted by a guy named Monty Cox. And Monty, he was a big promoter back in those days. And he managed guys like Matt Hughes, Tim Sylvia, Jens Pulver, Robbie Lawler, a lot of the UFC champions. Monty, he didn't even want me on his first Extreme Challenge event because it was a big event. And, only big name guys. And I was 1-1, but apparently I wasn't good enough for the card. What had actually happened was there was a tough man competition in my hometown, and you had to pay to compete in those, and it was $1,000 first prize, $100 for second, and if you won one, you couldn't fight in it again. And in the first round, I fought a guy. I know he was on the news before the event. He was a big built guy. I think they were advertising something like he was Paul Abdul's bodyguard. And this was the mid-90s, so remember Paul Abdul was still somewhat relevant. And I know for the event it was 185 and under and 186 and over were the weight classes. And I waited with my clothes on. I think I was 189 or 190. But, I didn't care. They threw me in with the heavyweights. And last fight of the night, I drew that guy. We're the only two left. That's how they did the brackets for those tough men. Was they just called names. You need to be ready to fight, and you didn't know when or who you were fighting. And they called me and him last, and I ended up winning because after one round, this dude gassed out. He sucked anyways. He wasn't a good boxer. I have some clips of that fight from that tough man. Horrible, horrible quality. But, you can judge for yourself. What happened was after like one round, the guy didn't even throw anything hard, but after a round he gassed himself out, and so after that it was easy. And what's funny about those tough mans, it was 3 1-minute rounds. I will go out there and I will throw punches for 3 minutes straight. Right now, having trained. And it's funny how horribly these guys gas. I don't recall gassing that bad, but I also didn't train, so I don't really know. I boxed a little. I had the concept of a jab and a 1-2, and I wasn't going out there just throwing haymakers all day. Second day of the event, I won my first round fight against a guy who was like 290. And actually watching the video of it, it was close. It'd go either way. I think they just gave me the win on the hometown favorite type thing, which actually came back to bite me in the end. In the finals, I fought a guy named Paul Wells. And I knew who Paul Wells was because he had fought for Monty Cox before, and he was a tough guy. I think he was like 5-1 at the time in MMA, which at that time was a lot of fights. And he's like 6'5". He's a lot bigger than I was. And I wasn't scared. I didn't care. I just wanted to fight. And but I didn't think I was going to win. But confidence and cockiness are two different things. And I was confident. I was confident that I was a tough guy. Cocky would be along the lines of I know I'm tougher than everybody. So I'll kick their ass. It's no, I know I'm tough. So if you win, whatever, but it's not going to be easy. That's about where I was. The fight went all 3 rounds, and I won. There wasn't a doubt that I won. But they gave him the win on a split decision. And, I didn't care. I was just happy to be there. And to be honest, I thought a lot of the guy, so I was just happy to go the distance. And Monty Cox told me later, Monty was one of the judges, and he had said that the promoter, who was kind of a shady guy, wanted the judges to vote against me no matter what, because I was a local guy. Paul Wells was from the Quad Cities, and I got a bunch of people to come watch me fight. So if I'd have won, I couldn't come back to his next one that he was going to do in a couple months, supposedly, and he wanted me to come back, so he told him to, judge against me. And he never even did another event, so that was pointless anyways. My first fight in Extreme Challenge was against a fighter named Clayton Miller. And we were the first fight of the night. So I was the first fight in Extreme Challenge history and picked up the first win in Extreme Challenge's history. In those days, they had a program for every event. And I know, he had a record of 11-5. And there weren't databases and stuff, so you couldn't really debunk that record. He had said he'd fought in Virginia, which I know he did. But he also said he had a bunch of fights in Missouri and stuff, which I'm pretty sure didn't happen. From what I understand now, it's more likely it's 0-1. I came out there and I just, body locked him, took him down. And I remember I just started working on some jiu-jitsu techniques, and I tried to armbar him. And the way I don't even know. I'm not going to try to explain how I thought you did an armbar, but it was horrible. So anybody could have defended against it, and he did pretty easy. I got the mount back, and I just threw a barrage of elbows and eventually knocked him out. And, just in those days, fights did go longer than they should have because referees were inexperienced, and they didn't know to recognize when a fighter is hurt. And so he's probably out for 3 or 4 of the elbows I threw after that. I know they ridiculed his corner woman was his wife, and they ridiculed the fact that she refused to throw the towel away. But I don't know, it was fun. It was fun enough to get another win, and at this point I was 2-1, and I actually kind of didn't get arrogant again, but kind of started to think I was a little tougher than I was, and I wasn't very tough. I was tough. I was just a naturally tough guy. You don't want to run me in the street, but if you knew how to do an armbar or triangle choke, you might be able to get out of a fight with me. And that is what happened. I got humbled pretty quick. February of 1997, I had 3 fights, and I lost 2 of them by a triangle choke. One fighter he was tough, but he didn't go on to accomplish anything. Another fighter was Ryan Jensen, who had a weird career. Like, I was his first fight, and then a few years later he beat Tyrone Roberts, and like, that was it for years, and then he fought in the UFC, and did really well in the UFC. But both these guys, they beat me by triangle chokes. In those days, and if you understand the sport, you'll laugh at this, but I thought you passed the guard by digging your hand in and scooping it over your head, which just feeds you a triangle choke. And so I was a sucker for it. My first performance in the cage that was notable was in my 8th fight. There was Monty Cox held a tournament in my hometown, and it was a 2-night event, and I won my fight the first night pretty easy. And then I fought a fighter named Brian Dunn in the finals of the tournament. And Dunn, he was like 7-1, maybe going into the fight, and he was considered one of Monty's best fighters. And I lost 15 minutes decision to him. I don't know. I mean, I don't recall being like super tired or anything, but Brian's not an aggressive guy, and he basically beat me on technique. I won the first. There was a 10-minute round with a 5-minute overtime, and I'd say I won the first round, but not by much. But in the finals, I took him down, and he rolled me right away. And he got the mount, and he just held the mount for 4.5 minutes. And that was enough to get him the win. I won again for Monty, and then on another small event. But my big break, when I was finally considered a real fighter, happened in Extreme Challenge 7, which was in Council Bluffs, Iowa. In the first round of a tournament, I fought Matt Anderson. And Matt Anderson was a veteran of UFC 9. He was a pretty tough guy. He's actually Jeremy Horn's half-brother, for any of you big MMA fans. And Matt, he was winning the fight, and then he went for an ankle lock, and I went with it, and I got them out and punched him a few times, and he tapped. I actually had no confidence that I'd win that fight. And just basically because he'd fought in the UFC, because at that time, and even still today, it's considered, the pinnacle of this sport and what makes you a real fighter. In the finals, I fought a fighter named Dennis Reed. And at this time, Dennis, I was a superstar for the Extreme Challenge fights. He had fought Dan Severn, and gave Dan Severn a hell of a go. He's one of the first fighters to ever take Dan Severn down in a fight. And that was giving up, 60, 70 pounds to Severn. And then he was coming off of a big tournament win in Michigan. And Dennis was supposed to beat me pretty easy, and I honestly thought he'd beat me pretty easy too. But he came at me, and I didn't know, I shot a double leg and picked him up and slammed him. I was one of the first guys to ever take Dennis down. I think I was the first guy to take Dennis down to fight. And he got away, he wizarded and escaped, and he came at me, and all I remember, I know what the video looks like, but all I remember was I saw him coming, and I threw just a bomb of a right hand, and I looked up and he was gone. And it landed. I knew it landed, but he was on the ground flopping and knocked him out. It was horrible on his end. I'm not even looking at him. I don't have the video. I really wish I did. I did at one time, but I didn't. I ducked my head and I just winged a right hand. And he walked right into it and caught him right on the chin, and knocked him out. And it was only 33 seconds long. And it was after that fight that actually my career turned around. I, at that point, was actually considered a legitimate fighter. Following that fight, about a month later, I fought an event for the first time that wasn't promoted by Monty Cox. I fought an event called Hook and Shoot in Indiana. It was I'd seen videos of their first two events, and what they did was they held the events in a martial arts gym. And it was bare knuckle, no time limits. It was old school rules, no biting, eye gouging, but everything else was completely legal. And in the first round, I drew a fighter named Brad Kohler. And Brad Kohler, he was just a juiced out freak. He was an Olympic wrestler. He was considered a contender, and we fought for 52 minutes. And I did tap to be in punch technically, but I just couldn't do anything to the guy. And the fight wasn't look like it was going to end anytime soon. I couldn't catch him in nothing. He'd take me down pretty easy. And he went on to win the tournament. He won the semis pretty easy, and then he had like a 17-minute fight in the final. But Brad Kohler went on after that. He started out like 7-0, and then I fought in the UFC, and I got armbarred by Trey Telgman. And I think from there he just picked up a win or two, and then, just whatever after that. I ended up fighting him again in 2010, so 13 years later I knocked him out in a minute. So I got my revenge. And then I fought in a rematch against Dennis Reed, because how are you going to lose to a pussy like me? And he did. So we fought in his hometown. Monty Cox decided to promote a fight in Muscatine, Iowa, and it was held outside. And Dennis, he was huge. I had fought him in the Quad Cities before on the same events, and he'd get the loudest cheer of anybody there. Reed sold lots and lots of tickets. And the fight was outside, which was the problem with fights being held outside, was the canvas would get wet and slippery. And that's what happened. Our fight didn't happen until after the sun went down, and the mat was slippery, and it was. I don't know. Dennis didn't seem to have the same confidence. I think he was nervous because I did knock him out. That does change people. You start becoming a little apprehensive to engage when you realize that you can be knocked out. And the fight, I wouldn't even say it was back and forth. It was my guard, and he went for an ankle lock, and I reversed him. He didn't do any damage, and I ended up triangle choked him. I tried to think how we ended up in that position. I'm catching him in a triangle choke at a little over 9 minutes, and tapped him out. And Dennis, he was a poor sport about it. Got pissy, and the crowd was very unruly. Broke out into a riot, and they actually had to lock me in the cage. Like, Dennis could leave, but they had to lock me in the cage for probably half an hour, and put cops around the door of the cage. Everybody's throwing their beer at me. I got drenched with beer. There were people along the side of the cage. I remember the only conversation, they're calling me pussy and everything like that. The only conversation I actually had was, I remember a girl told me, why'd you have to be a pussy and submit him? Why couldn't you stand up and punch him like a real man? And I said, the last time I did that, I knocked him out in 30 seconds, which is true. And she's like, you're a liar! And she jumped up on the cage and tried to crawl up and get me. I wonder if I had any fans that shit talked me for that. Maybe. I don't know. Anybody defended me like that? Usually people in my hometown shit talk me, so I don't know. But it was a big win. You could have argued that the first fight was a fluke, but actually submitting him this time was considered a big win. My first step out into a big event was in the IFC. It was in an event held in North Dakota in September of '97. And in the first round, I fought a guy out of Massachusetts. And while Dennis was my first standing knockout in MMA, he crappie flopped a little bit. He wasn't wasn't out cold. And he's out, clearly, but not out cold. In the first round, I fought a guy. I mean, I don't even know what was going through my head, and I just threw a straight right and caught him flush on the chin. It was a highlight reel knockout. I mean, it broke the record for the IFC. It was a 14-second long fight. And in the finals, I fought a fighter named Matt Limland, who, if you're an MMA fan, you know exactly who Matt Limland is. For a wrestling fan, Matt Limland had wrestled in the Olympics. And if you know Matt Limland, you're going to understand exactly what happened in this fight. About 2 minutes into the fight, I caught Limland in an armbar. He tapped out. And the referee kind of seemed just like clueless about it. He stopped. I stopped. I let go of the hold and stood up. So it was over. I won. And it was only about 2 minutes into it, and Matt started bitching, saying he didn't tap out, and he definitely tapped out. And, I was fucking, 20 years old? Yeah, I was 20. I wasn't cocky, I wanted to fight, and I was like, fuck it, I'll go again. And it was a stupid mistake. The referee wasn't going to argue. The referee actually just seemed confused by it all. I know he saw it, but, you're not used to seeing somebody tap and then argue that I didn't tap. And, it's 22 minutes into it. I know what happened was, it's the worst thing. It's a feeling that, fighters know. I mean, I would assume. I haven't really discussed this with fighters, but when you get rocked in a fight, it's like one of the worst feelings is getting rocked. You get confused. You don't know where you're at. And I've been rocked in lots of fights. And you try and think about, what am I doing here? Where am I at? I mean, just the weirdest thoughts in your head. And Matt shot a double leg, and somehow the way we came down around the back of my neck, and it rocked me. And I was confused for a minute, but once we hit the ground, while I was like dazed for a second, he was able to pass my guard, and he got the side mount and put me in a headlock choke. And it was only a matter of a second. I was claustrophobic, he had the hold on, and I tapped at like 22 minutes into the fight. But can't take away the fact I submitted him. I mean, it's a loss of my record, but I tapped that guy out in like 2 minutes. The IFC event in September '97 was like my real experience with kind of being a celebrity of sorts. I mean, it's a big event. It was in the middle of nowhere. They had anything at those times was comparable to the UFC, basically. And, with the big knockout win, people like that sort of thing. It's always what sticks out to people. People like the knockout, just like the baseball players, like the home runs. I don't have another reference to sports. Touchdowns, I don't fucking know. But knockouts are what people come to see. They don't come to see you take a guy down and catch him in an armbar. So people like me. I remember, I think it's the first place I actually signed like real autographs. Actually signed more than one. I've signed autographs in the past, which before that was, I felt dumb more than anything. But that night it was actually kind of cool because there was more than one. People or person come up to me wanting an autograph. My fight after that, I fought at a small event for a Shrimp Challenge in Des Moines, and I won by an armbar in like a minute. Then I fought another Shrimp Challenge event in November, won by a guillotine choke in like 2 minutes. And then I fought at a tournament in Michigan in December of '97. And it'd be my last fights of the year. I had a tough first round. I weighed about 200 pounds, but my first round opponent was like 260 or 70. It was a tough fight. It took me like 6 minutes to beat the guy. And then I fought a pretty tough guy named Noe Hernandez in the finals of the tournament. Noe won his first round fight in like 13 seconds. They said he was a really good stand-up fighter, so I took him down, and it's like he reversed me about a minute into it, and like had like half guard, and would stand up trying to get me back on my feet. And I was told this guy's so great standing that stand up with him, and I just kept trying to get him back down to the ground. And it was a 15-minute first round with a 5-minute overtime. In the overtime, I took him down and like had half guard for most of the round, but it was enough. He won the decision, and he won the fight. I didn't have any real damage, but neither did he. And that's how the 1997 year rounded off. no real exciting stories. I was still just a 20-year-old kid. I know most of the time I couldn't even get into the after-fight parties because I was 21 and older clubs, and in those days, I'm sure it's probably the same today, just because I was a fighter and fought on this event, they weren't going to let me in. So I didn't get inside any of the clubs or whatever. So most of the time I just went back to the hotel and thought about fighting. I still hadn't began training. Training consisted of fucking with my friends in my basement. But 1998 was a big year, and more interesting stories in that year. But that's how things started out for me in my career, and only got more and more interesting after that.